Today we're examining tips from viewers of this channel about how to keep your bike up and running smoothly with someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Hey everybody, I'm Tom and this is Shifter, a channel about urban cycling, bike commuting, and the ways we get around our cities. And if you like this video, please consider subscribing. And if you really like it, please consider becoming a Shifter member. Not only will you be supporting this channel, you'll get access to some exclusive content and some insider stuff. There's a link in the description down below. So a few weeks ago, I asked for tips from all of you about how to keep your bike running smoothly because I love biking and I hate doing bike maintenance and I never want any downtime taking my bike into the shop or fixing my own bike. And the best way to avoid having to fix your bike is to just have it running smoothly all the time, right? So I thought I would tap into the collective wisdom of the Shifter community, and it was amazing. You guys have so much knowledge to share and are so generous with your thoughts and your tips. There were hundreds of suggestions and it was amazing and I learned a lot too. So go look at those tips on the community tab. They're still there for you to take a look at. But as I was reading them, I realized I may be out of my depth in assessing the validity of some of these things, so I thought I would bring in an expert. Enter Arleigh Greenwald. You probably know her from her great YouTube and Instagram channels, Bike Shop Girl. She is a former bike shop owner, a bike mechanic, and she has probably forgotten more about the ins and outs of running a bike than I will ever know. And she agreed to help us out today.
Hey everyone, thanks for asking these great questions. And Tom, thanks for including me in this video.
So I took all of your tips and boiled them down to 10 big ones, and I will offer my thoughts on those 10 and also get Arleigh to weigh in on them as well. So you'll have a couple of different perspectives on this, and hopefully that will help you keep your bike running smoothly. And I'll stop talking so we can get started. Let's go. Tip number one, clean your bike regularly. So this is my go-to solution for almost every bike problem. I find that if you just keep it clean, it will solve maybe 80% of all your bike problems. And I'm sure people will recommend cleaning it daily or weekly or something like that, but you know, let's not get carried away here. I clean my bike when it's really dirty or when it's making funny noises. That may not be the best way, but that does solve a lot of problems in my experience anyway. Let's see what Arleigh has to say about this one.
Tom, your strategy is what I love to hear because you're keeping bike shops in business. For folks that ride a ton of miles, especially those with workhorse cargo bikes that are potentially carrying super heavy and precious loads, I do recommend wiping down your bike when you pump up your tires just to look for anything unusual like frayed cables, worn brake pads, or weird rattling noises. Also, if you're properly lubing your chain, you'll know when it needs really cleaned. For the rest of you, it's all right just to hop on your bike, but just be listening and kind of paying attention to your bike to make sure nothing sounds or feels unusual.
Tip number two, lube generously. So yeah, after I clean my bike, I will drip some lube on a chain. And that seems to help. It does make that creaky sound go away and it will keep it running smoothly. But beyond that, I don't do a lot of lubing. I don't really lube my other parts, and I'm not sure if this is the best way to go. So let's put this one to Arleigh as well.
Lubing your chain somewhat regularly could be the most cost-effective thing you do to save money when riding your bike. It doesn't have to be super often. Just listen for that rumbling metal on metal noise. Or I personally check mine every couple of weeks to month, depending how much I'm riding that bike.
Tip number three, learn to adjust your own brakes. So yeah, brakes are kind of important if you want to stay alive on your bike. And so learning to adjust them is a good skill to have because if anything you want running smoothly, it's going to be your brakes. If you need to stop, you need to stop. And so using good YouTube videos, I've taught myself how to adjust basic brakes, you know, rim brakes or caliper brakes. They're pretty straightforward, they're pretty mechanical, and with a screwdriver and a little bit of time and research, I'm sure you can figure out how to adjust your brakes, so that's great. But I am terrified of adjusting disc brakes, and especially hydraulic disc brakes. They scare me to bits, so I don't usually touch those. Let's see what Arleigh has to say about this one.
Brakes are such a hard thing. They're super intimidating. It's a safety feature, but servicing your own brakes could save you a lot of money and safety if you can't get into a local bike shop, especially on heavier cargo and electric bikes that go through brake pads a lot more often. Hydraulic disc brakes are some of the easiest to replace brake pads on, in my opinion. But again, something I would only recommend to someone that feels comfortable changing a flat tire and wants to take on being self-sufficient and saving money. For the rest of you, it's totally okay to visit your local bike shop and make sure they're doing it properly. Tom, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but when it comes to lubing your bike chain and your brake pads, I have 2 videos directly targeted at that.
Tip number 4 is to take care of your tires. Now, kudos to all of you out there who said you check your air pressure before every ride. Good for you, but I am not doing that. I think one of the important things about using your bike for transportation is that it's quick and easy to use. You can just grab it and go. And so I'm not checking my air pressure every day. However, you should check them regularly. I tend to go a few weeks, maybe a month, or if I'm feeling when I'm riding a little bit squishy, then it's time to check them. That being said, I will say that having optimal air pressure and even a good set of tires probably has more impact on the smoothness and efficiency of your ride than almost anything else you can do. Which leads to the question, should you be able to change your own tires? And ideally, the answer is yes, because you'll save money in the long run. But I also think there's this weird sense among cyclists that if you can't change your own tires, you're somehow not really a cyclist, which is stupid and elitist and dumb. We don't expect people to be able to change their own car tires. People take it into the shop all the time. So if you can't change your tires, don't feel any shame. Just take it into the bike shop and get it done. Or if a flat tire, or sorry Brits, if a puncture is your real nightmare, there are some other things you can do about it. You can use tire sealant or go tubeless, or recently I tried out these tire inserts from Tennis. They sent me these things to try them out. You put them inside your tire and it protects your tube from pokey things, and I've been running them for a few months and they're pretty great actually. So there are some things you can do to take care of your tires and avoid those punctures. But let's see what Arleigh has to say about this one.
I once posted a video of my cargo bike flat repair kit, which was a pump and my phone. See, I run sealant in all of my city bike tubes and tires, which fixes most problems like small pieces of glass, staples, really small nails, and all I have to do is add air. But that's because I ride a big cargo bike most of the time. On my daily commuters for just myself or a road bike, I definitely know how to change my tire quickly, and I would say if you practice it a few times, it's going to take maybe 10 minutes once you have it dialed in. But on that heavy duty cargo bike, the ones that are running sealant and I'm just carrying a pump, I typically have my kids or the bike's just too big and bulky to deal with on the side of a trail. And if that slime doesn't fix it, then I'm simply locking it up and calling for a pickup. For inflation, it really depends on what type of bike you have. The higher pressure road bike tires do need to be checked more often, but fatter balloon tires over maybe 2 inches can get away with not checking them for weeks.
For the next tip, I kind of combined a bunch into one broad idea. Lots of people suggested checking your chain and your spokes and your gears before every ride, and others said make sure you're not ignoring any weird noises. So I combined all these into one, like check your stuff before every ride. And this is good advice, I think, but my takeaway on this is to pick your battles. I feel like bikes have a ton of moving parts. Sometimes it's metal on metal. Sometimes things get jarred out of whack because you're moving and hopping curbs and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to make noise, and I think you can probably overreact to the noise. And if you're trying to fix every little thing so that's running perfectly every day, it might keep you off the road more than you would like. So my approach to this is to pick your battles. I mean, if there's an awful noise that's clearly something's wrong, of course you need to deal with it. I think the advice of like, if there's a weird noise that's new, you should probably check into it. But also, I just think like you can't make it run perfectly every day. But again, this is how I keep riding every day. That's important to me. Let's see what the mechanic has to say about all this.
Whew. Oh gosh, the amount of times someone has completely destroyed their bike by ignoring the weird noises. Yeah, it's dangerous, expensive, and just not something you would do in a car. If your car's making a terrible noise, you're going to take it immediately to the mechanic. So figure out what the noise is and then head to your local bike shop if it's serious. It might be that just a bolt on your rack is a little bit loose or a zip tie came undone, and those are things you can fix yourself. But if you have broken spokes or something is really loose and could be dangerous, you might want to stop riding and get it to your local bike shop super quickly.
The next tip is use wax on your chain or WD-40 regularly. Now the idea here is that wax doesn't need to be applied as often as lube on your chain, and so it will last a bit longer, but honestly I've never used this stuff and I have no idea what it does, so I'm throwing this one straight to the mechanic.
All right, these are such bike nerd questions. I personally have no time or patience to deal with waxing a bike chain. I look at bikes for transportation as tools. If you enjoy geeking out with your bike, please do. For the rest of the world, lube your chain when it makes a noise. And if you do use WD-40, make sure it is their bike specific type and not just WD-40 that you have in your garage for the squeaky garage door.
The next tip is keep bike maintenance costs in perspective. Now, I really like this idea because I've been there, probably you have too. You take your bike in for some maintenance and it costs more than you expect it to cost, and you're like, this costs half the value of the bike, therefore it's not worth doing it. But I think this is the wrong approach, especially if you're using a car as an alternative to a bike. Car maintenance costs are astronomically higher than a bike. I think sometimes we lose perspective on these things. The amount of money that goes into running a motor vehicle is off the charts. The last statistic I heard was something like $12,000 a year. And if that's the alternative to your bike, spending a few $100s on bike maintenance a couple of times a year or once a year just to keep it running smoothly is definitely worth the investment. And despite my lax maintenance, you should definitely listen to what Arleigh's got to say on this. I think making sure your bike's running smoothly will prevent more expensive fixes in the long run. So yes, definitely keep those costs in perspective. Let's see what Arleigh thinks about this one.
This is such a great point. Sometimes investing in the beginning with a better bike will lower maintenance, meaning saving you money and time long term, but it also might just give you the confidence that you don't have to worry about your bike as often. So high quality tires, shifting parts designed to be left out in the weather, and disc brakes are super critical. If you're buying an e-bike, make sure it is designed for all the elements that you might ride in. You know, if you're riding in the winter or the rain, you want to make sure your remotes and everything on your bike are waterproof. And also that the replacement parts for your bike are easy to find. You don't want to buy a really small niche brand and come to find out they use a unique tire size that no one else makes. Just as an example, for e-bikes, that might be a battery. You know, will they have it available in 4 to 5 years when your battery that you're currently using needs replaced?
And the last tip for this video comes from me, and that is to buy a low maintenance bike. So I don't love bike maintenance, but I also want a bike that's going to run well all the time. I just don't want to have to deal with a bike that's not smooth. And so I've learned over the years that I am a fan of low maintenance bikes. So what do I mean by a low maintenance bike? Well, for years I've ridden bikes with internal gears rather than derailleurs. I just find them so much easier to maintain. They take almost no maintenance. You probably sacrifice a little bit in weight and the shifting speed, but I find the trade-off is worth it because the bike is just always ready to go. In recent years, I've been lucky enough to ride a Priority, which is a company that specializes in carbon belt drives rather than chains, and I've come to love them. This year they came on as a sponsor, so I feel really lucky about that, but I have been riding them for several years, especially through the winter where maintenance is even more of a concern because the muck and the snow and the grime really gets into those chains and eats them pretty quickly. So I've become a fan of those bikes, and other things like fenders and even chain guards. Anything that can keep the elements off of the working components of your bike can make a big difference. And this has become my go-to method for maintenance, is buy a low maintenance bike and then you don't have to worry about that much anyway. So that's it. A big thanks goes out to Arleigh for sharing her expertise.
Tom, these were great questions. I love your audience. Thank you so much for including me in this.
A huge thanks to all of you in the Shifter community who shared your tips and your thoughts. I just love this community. There's so much goodwill and great insight to share. So that community tab is still there if you want to go see the hundreds of other tips that are there. And if you've got others, share them in the comments down below. This is a great resource for other people, especially those who are just getting started. We want more people riding bikes, and making it easier will enable that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.